Good morning, everyone. Today I want to address a difficult and often misunderstood topic, the biblical accounts of the elimination of the Canaanites and why this should not be viewed as genocide. This issue raises significant questions about justice, morality, and divine intentions, and it's important that we approach it with both sensitivity and a clear understanding of the context. The context of the Canaanite conquest. To understand the elimination of the Canaanites, we need to consider the historical and theological context. The Canaanites were a group of people living in the land promised to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. According to the Bible, particularly in the books of Joshua and Deuteronomy, God commanded the Israelites to drive out the Canaanites from this land. One key point to remember is that this command was not an arbitrary act of violence, but a response to the Canaanites' persistent and grievous moral corruption. The Canaanites were engaged in practices that were abhorrent to the Israelites, including child sacrifice and ritualistic paganism, as mentioned in Leviticus 18, verses 24 to 25. God's command was, in part, a judgment upon these practices and a means to prevent the Israelites from being corrupted by them. The nature of the command. It is essential to understand the nature of the command in its historical and theological context. The Bible describes these events in terms of war rather than genocide. Genocide is defined as the deliberate extermination of a particular group of people, often driven by ideology, race, or ethnicity. In contrast, the biblical narrative describes these actions as part of a specific historical and covenantal context, related to the establishment of a nation and a land promised to them by God. The conquest of Canaan was a part of God's larger plan for the Israelites, which included establishing a society based on justice and righteousness. The commands given were not about annihilating an entire people, but rather about removing those who were particularly corrupt and would lead the Israelites astray. We must also consider the terminology used in the biblical accounts. Phrases like utterly destroy, Hebrew harem, are used, but it's important to note that this terminology can sometimes reflect hyperbolic language common in ancient Near Eastern warfare. Similar language appears in other historical accounts of the time, reflecting a customary way of describing military conquest rather than literal extermination. For instance, when we read the Bible, we find that not all Canaanites were destroyed. Some were integrated into Israelite society, such as Rahab the prostitute and her family, Joshua 6:25. This indicates that the command was not about total extermination, but about dealing with specific serious issues of moral corruption. From a theological perspective, we understand that God's judgments are always righteous and just, even when they are difficult for us to comprehend. The focus of the biblical narrative is not on the glorification of violence, but on the establishment of a society that honors God and upholds his standards of justice and righteousness. The elimination of the Canaanites was a part of God's judgment on severe moral decay, intended to protect the Israelites from falling into similar practices. In conclusion, the biblical accounts of the Canaanite conquest should be understood in their historical, cultural, and theological context. It was not an act of genocide, but rather a complex event involving divine judgment, moral imperatives, and the establishment of a nation. As we wrestle with these difficult passages, let us approach them with a commitment to understanding the deeper themes of justice, righteousness, and divine purpose. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of a challenging topic. May our understanding of these scriptures deepen our faith and enhance our commitment to justice and righteousness in our own lives. Amen.